So we have one more storyteller, and you will love this. This is Aunt Leanne.
Oh, yay!
I know. Leanne has got her dulcimer, and she's got a story for us, so please welcome Aunt Leanne. Short to begin with, so we'll try that first. That. I'm going to move the whole thing and not knock it over.
It's all right. It's a rental microphone.
Oh, good. And then you're all going to help me by telling, see, I can hear me, so that's good. And I just want to make sure that you can hear this. Yeah? Okay. Great. Who knows if I'm going to play that or not, because Marilyn was practicing her storytelling art by saying I was a musician. I'm not quite a musician, but I love instruments, so I brought it along to share with you. We've heard so many wonderful stories tonight. I've been really entranced and not thinking about my story at all, which is really unusual, by the way. I just sit in the audience and not think about my story at all. But we've heard about the fairies who steal babies, right? And how to get them back, how to protect your home or your children from the fae. We've heard about Loch Ness, we've heard about a ghoulie, so many wonderful aspects of the unnatural in Scotland. And this year, I found some stories that I just love that are from the Shetland Islands. And this is one of those. And the Shetland Islands are they're up in the top of Scotland, and they're very, very close to Norway. And so when you look at their stories of their good folk, of their little people, they call them the Traw, T-R-A-W, the Traw. And they have a lot in common with those odd otherworldly creatures on the other side over in Norway, the trolls. But the Traw are very tiny. And although they are, I don't think that they would mind my saying, they're ugly. They're really ugly, tiny little people. They are also very smart. They don't disappear when the sun comes up. And they seem to have some benevolence some of the time to humans. And all of those things differentiate them from the trolls over in Norway. And there are other fae that you sometimes hear about in this area. And one of them is the Glaistig Lady, the Green Lady. So you'll see why I wore these particular clothes tonight. But the Green Lady shows up. She's human-sized. She's not a tiny little one. And she shows up in different stories. Sometimes she's not so benevolent. There's rumors that she drinks blood and plucks dogs from all their hair if they've been harassing her. But like all the good folk in that area, if you give them gifts, they're on your side. And in particular, the Green Lady, the Glaistig Lady, she shows up in her beautiful green gown that goes from the floor to her shoulders. And don't look too closely at her feet. Give her a gift, and she will take care of your cattle. And she will take care of a lost child. And she will take care of the elderly, the sick, or those whose wits aren't quite what they should be. But where did she come from? Is she one of the Traw? You don't really know, but this is a story that attempts to explain. Come and dance where the wild fairies play in a magical circle, a fairy ring. You won't want to leave, so forever you will stay where the moonbeams glance and the veil grows thin. It was a long time ago, somewhere on the Shetland Islands, there was a little girl named Alice. And Alice lost all of her family in one fell swoop. The plague came and she had not a single relation. There was an old farmer and his wife whose children were already grown, and they took her in, but they did not make her family. They fed her and they clothed her and they put her to work watching the cows. And after some time, the way these things go, the grown children, they didn't want to be cow farmers, and they sold the herd, and little Alice went with them. Because she didn't have any people, any family, anyone to love her, she had taken all the love in her little heart and poured it into the herd, the animals. So she was glad to go with them. From farm to farm to farm, she would look after the cows and any other animals as well, the sheep, the goats. But her heart was with the herd, until at last she landed on a farm where the farmer was mean in every sense of the word. He was cheap. He did not see why he should pay for a cow herd when he could get little Alice for practically nothing. And he did clothe her in some fashion, mostly in cast-off tatters that he replaced whenever she begged. And so she had holes in her boots and tattered clothes. But don't worry about her, she did not starve. Her heart was with the cattle, after all. She had butter and cream and milk, and she became a dab hand at making bread from the grist of the mill. The miller would let her crawl in and clean out that grist, which is a very dangerous job, and sometimes he even paid her with a full bag of flour. But even when he didn't, she had enough from the scrapings to make bread. And so she never starved. But she didn't have any people. Well, because Alice was so fond of these cattle, and I don't know if you've ever seen them, but they're kind of shaggy and cute. Look those up. And she really loved them, and if she was with a cow who was near her time, the birthing was always easy. And if there was a cow who was stray, Alice always found them and brought them back home. But there was this one winter that was turning to spring, and a storm had come in, and the thaw was going on, and there was a stray cow who was very near her time. And after Alice had brought all the others back to the barn, she went out looking. She could not find this cow until she heard the painful lowing, and it seemed to be coming from right over a ravine. She tightened her tatters around her, and she went over into the ravine, more sliding than walking. And there, at the bottom, in the rushing river, was a cow stuck between two rocks and bellowing for all she was worth. And little Alice, well, she tied a rope around her waist and the other end of it to a rock, and she took a step into that river, and it began to rush, almost taking the feet out from under her. She could not believe she could be any wetter and colder, but somehow she was. The cow was in distress, and so she went on. She got behind that cow, and she pushed with all her might in her little arms, all her weight, and at last the cow was free and swam to the side of the river and climbed out into the shadow of a tree, the barest shelter, and had her calf right there. And Alice, with what little she had left, crawled to the edge of the river and barely got out and fell completely asleep. And when she woke up, she was being licked by the cow, who was dividing her time between her own calf and Alice. When she saw that Alice was awake and her own calf was on its legs, she headed up over the ravine and back to the barn. But Alice was so tired still. And she thought about that she was all alone in the world. And the cows didn't really need her. She was thinking all about all of these things while she was untying the knot from around her waist. And I hate to say it, but she thought about giving up, about taking the rock and putting it back in the river and just letting go. And right around the time that she was thinking about that, she heard some music up the hill. Come and play where the wild fairies dance. And as she looked up, there was a granite overhang and a cavern that a warm golden light was coming out of. She struggled her way up the hill and she hid in a corner of that cavern underneath the granite. She got warm and dry. She didn't even think about it because the sight that beheld her was so amazing. There were dozens and dozens of the tiny little trawl, all playing music or dancing in a big circle around the most beautiful woman that Alice had ever seen. She had long red hair all the way down past her waist, and she was no bigger than the smallest child that Alice had ever seen. But she was a beautiful woman, and she was singing, "Come and dance where the wild fairies play. When a magical circle of fairy ring, you won't want to leave, so forever you will stay." Alice sneezed, and all the music stopped, and that beautiful red-haired woman looked right at Alice and said, "Mortal, were you invited?" And Alice started to cry. She said, "I'm so sorry, I didn't think I had it in me even to make it home alive. When I heard your music, I just had to come. I know I should have brought gifts." And in that moment, her heart wanted so much to see them again. She said without thinking, "And if I can come and see you again tomorrow, I will bring you gifts." Well, the beautiful red-haired woman who was the queen of the Fae, she waved her little green fingers. And with that, Alice was back in the cow barn. And she went right to work. She churned butter. She found the very best cheese. She made bread that was lighter and fluffier than she had ever made in her life. She took a little crock of cream and another of milk, and she piled it all into a basket, ready for the following night. She looked down at her torn and tattered clothes and cleaned them up the best she could. And then she went back. Not before she said goodnight to the new calf and new mother and all the other cows. And then back to the ravine. And she found that cavern, and it was silent and cold. She took a deep breath and she went inside and she laid out her gifts on a blanket. She closed her eyes. She said, "I am here." And with that, she heard the music start again. And she opened her eyes, and once again, the beautiful red-haired woman was in the middle of a circle. And Alice joined them. She danced and she sang, "Come and dance where the wild fairies play, in a magical circle, the fairy ring. the sun came up. And then her heart was so stricken. And the Queen of the Fae looked at her and said, "Mortal child, I can read what's in your heart. Shall I grant it?" And Alice nodded. And all of a sudden, she felt the clothes she'd been wearing melt away. She felt herself growing healthy and tall. And she was dressed in a long green gown. And when she picked up the hem and looked beneath, she had hooves, like any cow. She quickly dropped the skirt as the Queen of the Fairy laughed. She said, "You are one of us now, but what you do with it, Glaistig Lady, is up to you. So if you're ever in the Shetland Islands and you want to see some of the good people or the Glaistig Lady herself, be sure you bring some milk or cream, butter or bread to give as a gift, and maybe you will hear her sing."